Picture a kitchen radio, dial glowing amber in the dark. A woman standing over a sink of cold dishwater she stopped washing 3 minutes ago. A song is playing. She knows every word. In 1963, this song was inescapable. It was America's heartbeat for 11 straight weeks.
Dark clouds hurry from the sky. The preacher.
Tonight, we're opening a drawer of 12 forgotten number ones.
And eyes that would tempt.
12 songs that once owned the airwaves, the jukeboxes, the front porches of a country that doesn't exist anymore.
Just walk on by.
If you love the stories behind the music, subscribe now, because what happened to some of these voices will stay with you long after the credits roll. One of these songs was recorded by a man who was already gone. The countdown begins now.
This is where I grew up. Of the days both good and bad.
Number 12, Ferlin Husky, Wings of a Dove, 1960. Picture a small clapboard church at dusk, the doors propped open, moths circling the porch light while a congregation files out humming something they can't quite shake. Wings of a Dove was, by the final tally of 1960, the single biggest country song in the entire country. A gospel-tinged number about grace descending like a bird, sung by a man who'd spent the previous decade as one of Nashville's most reliable hitmakers.
He sends his pure, sweet love.
Ferlin Husky was already a star before this song, known almost as much for his comic alter ego Simon Crumb as for his straight ballads. But Wings of a Dove was different. Sincere, devotional, stripped of any wink. It became the song people requested at funerals, at weddings, at Sunday services that had nothing to do with country radio at all. It crossed into pop, into gospel playlists, into a kind of cultural ubiquity that very few country songs of any era achieve.
Wings of a dove on the wing.
And then, slowly, it simply stopped being asked for. As Nashville's sound modernized through the 60s, Husky's gentle, hymn-adjacent style began to feel like something from an earlier world, respected but rarely revisited.
Send him his love on the wing.
Wings of a Dove was, by year-end tallies, the number one country song of all of 1960. Not just a chart topper, but the defining hit of the year. Today it survives mostly in gospel hymnals and oldies compilations. Its origin as a country radio phenomenon almost entirely stripped from public memory.
On the wings of a dove.
Number 11, Leroy Van Dyke, Walk On By, 1961.
On to another, it wouldn't look.
Picture a car radio in a gravel driveway, engine ticking as it cools, a man sitting there long after he's arrived home, unwilling to turn the key and lose the song. That's what Walk On By did to people in 1961. It wasn't a ballad about a breakup. It was a ballad about the performance of not caring, the specific American art of walking past someone you love and pretending your chest isn't caving in.
On some street in town, pardon me.
Leroy Van Dyke had been a livestock auctioneer before he was a singer, and you can hear that rhythm in his phrasing, that fast, controlled patter that made Walk On By feel less like it was sung and more like it was delivered, like an announcement nobody wanted to hear. The song spent an extraordinary run at number 1 on the country chart, a record that stood for decades before anything else matched it.
At a place outside of town.
And yet ask a room full of country fans under 50 who Leroy Van Dyke is, and you'll get silence. Not because the song wasn't good enough, because the machine that made him a star in 1961 had already stopped paying attention to him by the back half of the decade, chasing newer, younger faces, while the man who'd broken records got quietly filed under Legacy Act. The record Van Dyke set with Walk On By, the longest run at #1 in the history of the country chart, went unbroken for over 3 decades. And yet, when it was finally broken, headlines barely mentioned his name. In country music, the record can outlive the memory of the man who set it. Number 10. Sheb Wooley, That's My Pa, 1962.
Start picking cotton about daylight. On Saturday, Pa'd take it all the time.
Picture a drive-in movie screen flickering against a purple sky, a stuntman lying in the dirt just out of frame, waiting for his cue to fall again. That was Sheb Wooley's actual day job. He was one of Hollywood's most reliable stunt performers and character actors, the man who played the outlaw shot off his horse in 100 westerns you've half forgotten. But in the space of a few years, Wooley also became one of the strangest chart phenomena in American music. He'd already had a freak novelty hit years earlier about a one-eyed, one-horned creature that doesn't need repeating here. Then, in 1962, on his very first appearance on the country chart, he shot straight to #1 with That's My Pa, a completely different kind of song, wry and warm, about the exaggerating, storytelling father every listener recognized from their own childhood porch. It should have launched him as a full-fledged country star. Instead, Hollywood kept calling, and the industry never quite figured out where to file a man who was equally famous for falling off horses as he was for topping the charts. Wooley reached #1 on his very first try, a feat almost nobody in country music history can claim, and yet he's remembered today almost exclusively for a novelty song about a purple monster. The industry decided which version of Sheb Wooley was worth preserving, and it wasn't the one who wrote the most honest song of his career. Number 9. Bill Anderson, Mama Sang a Song, 1962. Picture a hymnal left open on a piano nobody plays anymore, dust settling into the crease of the page. Bill Anderson didn't sing Mama Sang a Song so much as he whispered it, and that whisper became his signature, the reason an entire generation of Nashville insiders nicknamed him Whisperin' Bill. It wasn't a vocal limitation, it was a choice, a refusal to compete with the emotion of his own lyrics by shouting over them.
I've been rocked to sleep many a night to the tune of What a Friend.
Mama Sang a Song reached #1 by doing almost nothing that 1962 radio was supposed to do. No crossover pop sheen, no upbeat hook, just a grown man quietly grieving the hymns his mother used to sing. It became one of the most licensed, most re-recorded country songs of its era, covered by artists who understood that Anderson had found something rare, restraint as a weapon.
4 miles to school every day, through the rain, the sleet.
Anderson would go on to have a long career as a songwriter, penning hits for other artists for decades after his own chart run faded. Proof that his gift outlasted his fame, even if his own name didn't stay attached to it in the public's memory.
And come morning, Rock of Ages would wake me gently once again.
Many of Bill Anderson's biggest songwriting successes in later decades were hits for other singers. Chart toppers the public associates with someone else's voice entirely. The industry happily cashed the royalty checks his pen generated while letting his own name fade from the marquee.
I guess the house is still standing. I don't get to go back much anymore.
Number 8. George Hamilton IV, Abilene, 1963. Picture a Greyhound bus pulling out of a small Texas depot at dusk, a woman's hand pressed flat against the window glass. Abilene wasn't really about Abilene. It was about the ache of every place you left behind and can never quite get back to. And it made George Hamilton IV, barely into his 20s, into one of the biggest country stars in America.
Prettiest town I've ever.
Hamilton would go on to become something almost nobody else from this era achieved. A genuine international ambassador for country music, touring behind the Iron Curtain, playing to audiences in the Soviet bloc who had almost no access to American culture at all. He carried Abilene and the entire genre across borders that most of Nashville never even tried to cross. But international acclaim doesn't always translate to domestic memory. As the country charts shifted toward a harder, more electric sound later in the decade, Hamilton's gentler, folk-leaning style increasingly read as old-fashioned to American radio programmers, even as European and Eastern Bloc audiences still filled arenas for him. George Hamilton IV was, by many accounts, more consistently celebrated overseas, in places where American singers rarely performed at all, than he was on American radio by the end of his career. A man who helped export country music to the world came home to an industry that had quietly moved on without him.
Wish to the Lord that I.
Number 7. Del Reeves, Girl on the Billboard, 1965.
Down the highway in my Jimmy hauling freight from Chicago to St. Louis, Lord, I.
Picture a two-lane highway stretching toward Chicago, a trucker's headlights sweeping across a billboard advertisement in the dark, a painted woman's smile frozen 40 feet tall above the road. Girl on the Billboard was silly on its surface, a novelty song about a long-haul driver falling for an advertisement. But underneath the punchline was something quietly true about loneliness on the open road, the way solitary men invented company out of anything that smiled back at them.
On the Route 66 from the.
Del Reeves had been grinding through the industry for years before this song, bouncing between labels, picking up a nickname, the Doodle Oo Doo Doo Kid, for the vocal sound effects he sprinkled into his records. When Girl on the Billboard finally hit number 1, it wasn't just a hit. It was validation after a decade of near misses, proof the gamble had paid off. Reeves kept working steadily for years afterward, notching respectable follow-up hits, and eventually becoming a music executive who helped launch other careers. But the number 1 that made his name never repeated itself. Girl on the Billboard was, and remains, the only number 1 of Del Reeves's entire career. One peak in a catalog of dozens of singles. Today, even that single peak has faded from country radio almost entirely, meaning the one moment that defined him commercially has nearly vanished from public memory too. Number 6. Warner Mack, The Bridge Washed Out, 1965.
Over the bridge across town. Now I'm running up and down.
Picture a flooded county road at midnight, headlights catching the churn of brown water where a bridge used to be. The bridge washed out turned a literal physical disaster into a metaphor every listener understood instantly. The sudden, uncrossable gap between where you are and the person you're desperate to reach.
When I awoke to this.
Warner Mack rode the song to number 1, a career peak that should have cemented him as a permanent Nashville fixture. He had the voice, the songwriting instincts, and a genuine flair for turning small-town imagery into universal heartbreak. For a moment, he was exactly what country radio wanted.
I try to swim that raging old river.
But Mack's momentum never fully compounded the way it did for some of his contemporaries. Health issues and the simple, brutal math of a crowded, fast-turning industry meant that the follow-through, the sustained decade of hits that turns a star into a legend, never fully arrived. He kept working, kept touring, kept recording, but the number one became less a launching pad and more a peak he spent the rest of his career circling back toward.
Foot in the water, 1 foot solid on the.
Warner Mack's chart-topping moment is, for many casual fans today, entirely disconnected from his name. People who know "The Bridge Washed Out" as a phrase or a feeling often couldn't tell you who sang it. The song outlived the singer's fame by decades.
On the other side, yeah, the bridge washed out.
Number 5, Sonny James, "Behind the Tear," 1965.
Behind the tree,
Picture a photograph slipping out of a wallet, creased soft from years of being carried and never once thrown away. Sonny James, they called him the Southern Gentleman, built an entire career on that kind of quiet devastation, and "Behind the Tear" was one of the purest distillations of it. A song about the private grief nobody sees because we've all gotten so good at performing composure in public.
eyes a broken dream.
James would go on to set chart records of his own, stacking an almost unbelievable run of consecutive number ones across the back half of the 1960s and into the 1970s, a streak that, for a time, made him one of the most commercially dominant men in the genre's history.
Oh, not much bigger.
And yet the sheer volume of his success may have worked against his individual memory. When an artist has so many number ones, none of them tend to become the song people associate with him. Ask a modern listener to name one Sonny James single, and even devoted classic country fans often draw a blank, buried under his own staggering consistency.
Broken dream.
Sonny James strung together one of the longest consecutive number one streaks in hot country songs chart history, a record so dominant it should be legendary on its own. Instead, his name is often the answer nobody remembers to a trivia question nobody asks.
I'm the hurt, a broken heart.
Number 4, David Houston, "Almost Persuaded," 1966. Picture a motel sign buzzing pink against a rainy highway. A man sitting in his car outside, hand on the door handle, not moving. "Almost Persuaded" was a song about the moment right before a mistake, the split second of temptation before a decision gets made. And it resonated so completely that it became not just David Houston's signature song, but the single biggest country hit of the entire year.
Met a girl.
Houston's voice had a smoothness that made him a natural crossover artist, and for a stretch in the mid-1960s, he was arguably the biggest star in the format. "Almost Persuaded" won him Grammy recognition and cemented his place at the absolute top of Nashville's hierarchy.
Was flowing like
But the top of that hierarchy in the 1960s was an unstable place to stand. As the decade turned and musical tastes shifted again, Houston struggled to translate his early dominance into the kind of multi-decade institutional status that some of his peers achieved. Financial and personal struggles followed him in later years, a common but rarely discussed pattern for artists whose fame peaked hard and early. David Houston had the year's biggest country song in 1966. An achievement bigger than almost anything on this list. And yet by the time of his death decades later, Obituaries had to explain who he was to readers who'd never heard the name. Being the biggest star of a single year is no guarantee the culture will remember you were ever there at all. Number 3. Jack Greene, There Goes My Everything, 1967.
Slowly walking.
Picture a suitcase half-packed on a bed, one shoe still in a closet, because nobody could bring themselves to finish. Jack Greene had spent years as the drummer in Ernest Tubbs' band before he ever stepped up to a microphone as a solo artist. A sideman's apprenticeship that taught him exactly how a song was supposed to breathe before he ever sang one of his own. When There Goes My Everything hit number 1, it didn't just top the chart. It won the Country Music Association's inaugural Song of the Year and Single of the Year awards, and Greene himself took home Male Vocalist of the Year, a clean sweep that for 1 year made him the undisputed face of the genre.
As my memory.
That kind of instant, total validation is rare, and it's also dangerous. The industry crowns a new king every year, and the crown doesn't come with tenure. Greene had a genuinely strong run through the late 60s and early 70s, but as new voices arrived, harder-edged, more radio-friendly for the next decade's tastes, his particular brand of restrained, ballad-driven singing became harder to place on playlists built for a different era.
Of my dreams.
Jack Greene won some of the very first major honors the Country Music Association ever handed out. Historic, first-of-their-kind achievements. And today, those specific wins are footnotes even within CMA history retrospectives. Being first doesn't guarantee being remembered. Sometimes it just means being overwritten by everyone who came after.
There goes the one of my.
Number 2. Johnny Wright, Hello Vietnam, 1965. Picture a kitchen table with a letter on it, unopened, because the return address is a military base and nobody wants to read bad news standing up. In early 1965, before most Americans fully understood what was happening on the other side of the world, Hello Vietnam reached number 1, one of the first major hit songs to say the war's name out loud, months before it dominated the evening news. Johnny Wright had already lived an entire career inside country music's history before this song. He was married to Kitty Wells, one of the genre's true pioneers, and had performed for decades as part of one of Nashville's most respected musical families. But Hello Vietnam put him somewhere his earlier career hadn't, directly in the path of a national reckoning that hadn't even fully begun.
The ship is waiting for us.
The song was patriotic, earnest, and completely sincere. A husband's eye view of duty and departure, written before the war became the fracture point it would become by the end of the decade. And that sincerity is exactly why it became so hard to hear later, as American public opinion on Vietnam shifted dramatically over the following years. A song that once felt like comfort started to feel, to many listeners, like propaganda from a more innocent, or more naive, moment.
Through our hands.
Hello Vietnam was written and topped the charts in January 1965, months before large-scale American ground combat units were even deployed to Vietnam. The song's own early sincerity became the very reason radio quietly stopped playing it, as the war it named turned into the most divisive conflict in modern American memory. It didn't age out of relevance, it aged into discomfort.
Hello, Vietnam.
Number 1. Jim Reeves, Distant Drums, 1966.
So many
Mary, Mary.
Picture a record spinning on a turntable in an otherwise silent room, the label going around and around, and the strange, impossible fact that the man singing has been dead for nearly 2 years. Distant Drums reached #1 in 1966, a full 22 months after Jim Reeves died in a small plane crash outside Nashville in the summer of 1964. Reeves had been one of the smoothest, most quietly influential voices in country music history, a pioneer of what became known as the Nashville sound, lush, string-laden, deliberately crossing country into pop territory in a way that widened the entire genre's audience. When his plane went down in a storm, it didn't end his career. It suspended it in amber. His label and estate continued releasing his previously recorded material for years afterward. And Distant Drums, a song about a soldier anticipating his own death on a battlefield, recorded not knowing how eerily it would echo Reeves's own fate, became his single biggest chart triumph, achieved entirely posthumously. Listeners in 1966 were, quite literally, buying a #1 hit from a man who could never know he'd earned it. Jim Reeves's biggest #1, the pinnacle of his entire commercial career, happened after his death, built from a song about a man facing his own mortality. He never got to hear it top the chart. He never got to hear how completely, permanently, an entire genre would keep his voice alive without him in the room to enjoy it.
Love me now.
12 songs, 12 voices that once owned every radio in America, and today most of them are strangers to the very country that made them famous.
Her soft hands in mine.
That's the cruelty of the charts. They're letters mailed to a future version of us that never wrote back.
Not supposed to know.
If tonight reminded you that a #1 hit is never really permanent, tell us which of these names surprised you in the comments, and subscribe. Because we are not done uncovering the voices Nashville tried to let fade.
Every day, through the rain, the sleet, and the cold.
There are more of these stories waiting. The music never lies, even when the industry does.
Love me